Hi, I want you to imagine it's the start of a new school year or maybe a new semester, and you get your class list from your administration and you open up the list and you find out that many students have enrolled for your classes. Maybe you let out an audible gasp and you start to wonder how you're going to deal with the many challenges that a large class may pose. Now, in today's presentation, we're going to be talking about strategies for teaching large classes. My name is Andy Boon. I'm a professor at Toyo Gakuen University in Tokyo, Japan, and my co-presenter is Teruyo Nakao, and she is also working at Toyo Gakuen University. Now, there are many challenges that teaching a large class can give a teacher. For example, how do you go about remembering everyone's names? If you have 40 or 50 students in the class or even more, it can be a real challenge to put a name to everyone's face. How can you check attendance? Checking attendance could be very time-consuming. How can you get through the roster and make sure everyone is there, or check who is absent in that lesson? Output is really important for an English class. How can you provide opportunities for students to speak in class? If there are over 40 students in the class, maybe they have a more limited opportunity to practice speaking English or communicating. How can you put students into groups? There's so many students. How can you group them? During the class, how can you get around the classroom to monitor each student, to offer them support, to offer them scaffolding during the activities that you have given them? What about assessment? How can you go about assessing so many students? If you're giving homework, you have to check that homework. If you're giving midterm semester tests or end projects, how can you assess all of the students adequately? This is a situation which is very familiar for language teachers around the world, and in today's presentation we're going to offer some strategies for 4 of the challenges. One is remembering names, the other is monitoring students, assessing students, and finally creating opportunities for students to speak in the classroom. So what is a large class? Well, the answer can vary depending on the individual teacher. To get data for our research into strategies for teaching large classes, we conducted an online survey and we got 56 responses. 38 were from teachers based in Japan and 18 were from different countries, from teachers from around the world. And the first question we asked, what do you consider to be a large class? Now, answers range from only 12 students. Some teachers consider that to be a large class, to 60 students, but the most common response was between 25 and 30 students was considered to be a large class. Some comments by teachers were, if the number of enrolled students is more than 25, the classroom is crowded, it takes more time to manage it, more effort to do every activity, and teachers tend to revert to a traditional mode of teaching in large classes. Another respondent said that 30 was a large class because the teacher couldn't give the students the individual attention that they required. Interestingly, in the research, when asked about the biggest group that teachers had taught in their lives, teachers replied with significantly higher numbers than those that they'd offered for what they considered to be a large class. For example, one respondent said that 25 students makes it more challenging to teach the class, but had actually taught an online class with over 500 students. Another respondent said that 40 students was full capacity, but that teacher had taught a communication skills course with 80 students. Okay, so let's look at some strategies for remembering names. Some of these strategies came from the survey data, and some are our own ideas, some strategies that we use in our classes. Now, it's really important to remember the names of your individual learners so that they feel recognized, respected, and valued in your classes, that they feel part of the learning community, and then they're going to be more engaged in the learning process. One very obvious strategy to use at the beginning of a new course is to have students write their names on name cards and to put them in front of them so that when you're teaching the class, at a glance, you can see the student's name. An alternative strategy is to take class photographs with students holding a piece of paper with their name, and then you can bring the photograph to your class at the beginning. You can look at it and look at the sea of faces and try and put a name to each face. One activity that I like to use in my classes is in the first lesson to do an icebreaker activity. Students walk around the classroom asking each other questions to get to know one another. For example, where do you live? What do you do in your free time? They take notes on the student's name and on their answer. After walking around the classroom and getting all of this information about their classmates, I sit them back into their groups and I make a group 1, a group 2, a group 3, a group 4, and so on. And then I go through the register and ask each student to stand up. Let's say you have a student who is called Shiori. So I say, Shiori, please stand up. Who spoke to Shiori? Who can tell me one thing about Shiori? Maybe a student answers, well, Shiori likes K-pop. While Shiori is answering, I'm writing Shiori's name on a seat map. Then I ask the next student on the register to stand up. Let's say we have Takeru. So Takeru stands up. Who spoke to Takeru? What do you know about Takeru? Oh, Takeru lives in Tokyo. Now I've written Takeru, maybe he's part of group 3. And as I repeat this activity, I'm building my seat map, and then I am memorizing their names, the names of each student in each group. You've probably got groups of 4. At the end of the activity, I say to my students, we're going to have a test. The students are always shocked. What do you mean, a test in lesson 1? And I say, no, this is my test. I'm going to try and remember your names. Using the seat map that I've memorized during the activity, I then try and say the name of every student in the class so that they can see that I'm investing time in trying to remember their names. At the start of lesson 2, I can then try and put the face to the name again, and I can start to rebuild this memory activity. Probably by about lesson 3, 4, or 5, you begin to remember your students' names. I'm now going to pass to Nakao Sensei, who's going to explain about strategies for monitoring students.
Thank you, Andy Sensei, for explaining remembering names. Now I'm going to talk about monitoring students in large classes. Monitoring students in large classes is very important to make sure they stay engaged, understand the material, and make progress. In our survey, the respondents mentioned the importance of walking around the classroom regularly to check that students are on task. And they also suggested electing student group leaders to monitor their group and having leaders change on a per activity or per lesson basis. Now, I'm going to explain some other strategies we can use to monitor students in large classes. The first one is the quiet method. This quiet method is very useful when the class gets noisy and disrupted. Teachers write the word quiet on the board. When students are not focused on teacher's instructions for the next task, for example, the teacher stops speaking and points to the word on the board. Usually, students will self-manage or peer manage their behavior within their particular group and begin listening. Another strategy for monitoring students in large classes is random selection. By selecting students randomly to participate in a lesson, the teacher can keep students on their toes as they are not certain when they might be called upon. So students need to pay attention to what's going on all the time. This can help them to stay engaged throughout the lesson. Okay, next I'm going to talk about assessing students in large classes. Assessing students in large classes requires careful planning and efficient strategies to ensure fairness, accuracy, and consistent meaningful feedback. In our survey, the respondents suggested involving students in peer assessment as a means to reduce the burden on the teacher. Now, I'm going to talk about some other strategies we can use to assess students in large classes. The first one is digital platforms. Using digital platforms such as Zengengo to conduct regular online quizzes and tests can allow for efficient assessment of the comprehension and progress of a large number of students. Automated grading and on-the-spot feedback enable students to receive prompt evaluation, which makes it easier for teachers to provide individual support to a large group. Another idea to assess students in large classes, is to have students present their work for a short time to small groups. Using an electronic device or poster, presenters repeat their presentations a number of times. Groups then rotate around different presentations in the room. After, one member in each group switches from audience member to being the next presenter, and they repeat the process. This approach divides large classes into manageable groups, boosts students' confidence in presenting, allows them to repeat the material, and also provides teachers with opportunities to assess individual students. Finally, Andy Sensei will explain creating opportunities for students to speak.
Okay, thank you, Nakao-sensei, for explaining strategies for assessing students. Another challenge with large classes is creating opportunities for students to speak. In a language class, we want our students to be engaged and to participate, as this will help with language acquisition. But obviously, the more students there are in the class, the less opportunities for students to speak and to contribute. Now, in our survey, many respondents mentioned about group work or pair work as being the best strategy to maximize speaking. But one strategy that I like to do is called kaiten sushi, or revolving sushi bar. Maybe you've seen revolving sushi bars where the sushi goes round on the conveyor belt. Well, here you can have a structured approach to student interaction where you use the tables in the classroom and you put students facing one another at the ends of each table. If you have a row of 12 tables in the classroom, you can put 24 students on one set of tables, and then another set of tables, you can have another 24 students, and so on. They can then interact together. Let's say you're doing a class on present perfect, and you want students to practice present perfect questions. Have you ever traveled abroad? Have you ever eaten a certain dish? Have you ever played sport? Have you ever been to a live concert? They can then interact with their partner who is facing them at the end of the table, and after a short period of time, all of the students rotate around all of the tables and they get a new partner. They move one space around the tables, they get a new partner, they repeat, they revolve again, they repeat, they revolve again, and they repeat. So you can have a set of 24 students on one table, a set of 24 students on another table, and a set of 24 students on another table, and keep revolving them around the tables so they get to interact with new students each time. This will maximize opportunities for students to speak in large classes.
In this presentation, we looked at some challenges we face when teaching large classes and provided some practical ideas for remembering names, monitoring students, assessing students, and creating opportunities for maximizing speaking. When teaching large classes, although we have these practical ideas in mind, there will be some times when lessons do not go as we planned and we feel overwhelmed. But please embrace the challenge. Take a deep breath and reflect on ways to overcome any difficulties. Think of and experiment with new teaching ideas. So, let us get ready to inspire many wonderful students. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation.